Shaking continues in the Sierra. Less than an hour ago, a magnitude 4.4 quake hit the same area where we saw rock slides and other big problems today. Well, Caltrans will be working through the night into tomorrow to clear the rocks now blocking a number of narrow mountain passes.
The largest quake, a magnitude 6.0, struck at about 3:49 this afternoon.
Big potential for disaster here, right? See all these bottles, but those bottles are just sitting on the little shelves right there.
Eric Edgar manages the wine steward in downtown Pleasanton and was working in the shop when the quake hit.
It was a lot of shaking, building up some, and it just kept going for some time.
His first thought, the wine.
I've been here 22 years. We have yet to lose a bottle to an earthquake.
Like a rocking. First I thought I'm getting migraines or something is going on, nausea, but then I looked at the light and it was moving.
It just felt like my office was shaking quite a bit. You know, about the longest earthquake I've felt since living here for 20 years. So I thought it was pretty significant.
USGS says people hundreds of miles from the epicenter could feel the shaking, from Redding to Sacramento to Fresno and out to San Jose and San Francisco.
The earthquake is the result of normal faulting. It's a pretty well understood and expected mechanism for an earthquake at the eastern boundary of the Sierra Nevada mountains.
This is a classic aftershock sequence. So you'll get maybe a 6, and then you get a 4, and then some 3s, and a 3.5, and then you get another 4, and then you get some 2s, and it just bounces around. Now, occasionally, maybe in our area, maybe upwards of 20-25% of the time, it could be a foreshock for a bigger earthquake, an hour down the road, a day, even a month. The probabilities get less and less the further away you get away from it. But that was a big jolt. The last 5.9 we've had in the area was back in the mid-90s.
Wait, it's the whole thing.
Oh, yeah.
What the hell's going on?
I don't know, but
Look at the other side.
Over.
Look at the other side. It was an earthquake.
How do you know?
Because the tires went a little funny. I thought, oh, maybe the road was just funny. It kind of wiggled. I thought, oh, maybe it was just the road.
It was. It is an earthquake because it's going right along the side of the mountain there.
Yeah, it's an earthquake. That was an earthquake.
That is a big earthquake.
I thought it was just the road. I don't understand. Dude, don't worry about that.
Breaking news, the 3 earthquakes that hit in the Lenox area. Now we're hearing from Dr. Lucy Jones, right? Southern California's earthquake expert. Here she is posting about what we experienced. She's saying the magnitude 4 that just happened was under Lenox, California, near Inglewood. Very deep at 20 kilometers, so everyone at least 20 kilometers away would have felt this. And then she went on to say movement was thrust, probably not on any mapped fault. And then she posted a link to the USGS website here. She's also posting that the Lenox magnitude 4.0 also had a magnitude 3.0 foreshock and a bunch of all other events at the same depth, which you were talking about, Tony. Why that's important is because
the deeper it is, the less it's felt on the surface. The more shallow the depth, the more you feel the earthquake on the surface. So that a smaller magnitude earthquake can do a lot more damage when it's very shallow.
You can see us as we felt it there and see the camera, actually see the studio shaking right there. And that was from the 4.0 earthquake in Inglewood. So it turns out that was the strongest of the 3 quakes that happened within the range of about an hour. The first one at 4:15, a 3.3, the second 20 seconds later at 2.5, and then that one that we have on camera there, 4:45, a 4.0. Felt as far away as south as Brea, West Hollywood, South Los Angeles.
Yeah, that's right. Santa Monica, West Hollywood, Studio City.
Yeah, we were actually in a Stockton Crime Stoppers meeting here in downtown Stockton when we felt the earthquake. We saw the lights swinging back and forth on the wall of the building that we were in. And it lasted for about 10 to 15 seconds. It was kind of like a rolling type of an earthquake. Yeah, obviously we do have emergency plans in place. This is when we would work with the fire department, PG&E, code enforcement, any of those type of agencies. If we got reports, we would definitely be out in that area. And obviously when something like this does hit, our patrol officers would, drive around and just see if they see anything unusual, any type of power lines down. But so far, we have no information of that happening here in Stockton. Now, just in the room that we were in, we just saw obviously we felt the earthquake and we saw the lights swinging above us, but nothing fell off the wall. And the epicenter of this was actually in a small town east of us in Farmington, which is kind of a lot of dairy farms out there, and we're unaware if any damage actually happened out there.
All right, and we do know, Stockton does have some aging buildings there downtown, and those, of course, are the buildings that you have some concern with that older construction, not up to current seismic standards. So it's very good to know that we have no reports of damage in Stockton at all.
In the East Bay, it's a magnitude 4 earthquake. It just hit near Ashland. That is a community, small community in unincorporated Alameda County near Castro Valley.
You can definitely tell it was an earthquake, and I took to Twitter right afterwards and got some responses from people on Twitter, people in Clayton, Half Moon Bay, Emeryville, Berkeley, Oakland. A lot of people reporting feeling that earthquake today. One person in Oakland says, my entire house shook and my dog is confused. TR from Donahue from Berkeley says it was a quick and strong earthquake in Berkeley. And even our writer who works from home in San Francisco says that her apartment felt like there was a bubble underneath it. So it definitely was a very noticeable earthquake, 4.0, centered just about 15 miles south from here, guys.
An earthquake struck the Central Valley, and it was a pretty good one. This one is 4.8 magnitude. It was about 11 kilometers, as the USGS puts it, west-southwest of Farmington, which is a community east of Stockton. So pretty good shaker. And you know what? We're finding out at about the same time there was another earthquake, and this one was much larger. This one was a 6.2. This was located right near the California state line, about 32 kilometers, it says south-southwest of Smith Valley, Nevada. So that was a stronger earthquake in the Sierra, and that one happened first at 3:49 and 48 seconds, and then right at 3:50 and 13 seconds is when that 4.8 magnitude quake happened around Farmington, which I don't know if you could hear it, but our newsroom phones are ringing. But I'll tell you, in the newsroom, I felt it. My computer monitor started shaking, and then people across the newsroom started feeling the rolling, and it seemed to go for some time.
You've lived here a lot longer than I have, but how unusual is this for this particular area?
I don't recall seeing an earthquake of this size in the Central Valley. We had a swarm of quakes, just a week or two ago in the East Bay, and the Hayward Fault is located there, but I'm not even sure what fault lines we have that exist.
And that's why probably, since we had a 4.8, everyone really felt this thing almost like it was a bigger and stronger quake. And you also mentioned the one that was out there over toward, I want to say Lee Vining area, over toward the state line. Yeah. It's interesting that these popped up. And also on this, now notice here, you'll see some red dots that are popping on there. Those are actually the earthquake sensors that I have in the computer, so they're just catching up
off to the far right of the screen.
Well, actually, even look where I placed that earthquake graphic where it's kind of pulsing. You'll see a red dot pop up. That is the Farmington one. And then the other two are bigger, meaning those are the ones over there toward the east side of the state. And you got to remember, we're on the ring of fire here. So you've got Mammoth Mountain down there, which is that one popping by Mono Lake there. It's a volcano. I mean, they're not active, but this is all around the area. Lassen is just around the corner here too. So you've got a lot of interesting things that can go on as a result of course, the seismic potential in the state of California. And a lot of times, you can basically fire up these earthquake monitors that we have in our system, and you will have dots going like crazy. And the main reason you have dots going like crazy is because it's California. We have them all the time, but not in the Central Valley, not just to the east of Stockton.
And it wasn't that long ago we had a swarm, as they're called, in the Tahoe area, right? And that's certainly not unusual, particularly unusual, at least for that area.
You can get them up there. I mean, the bottom line is we have a lot of quake potential, but it's having it in the valley that's really, I have to tell you, I've been here 25, 28 years. I don't think I've had anything quite like that happen in the Central Valley where we've had a quake like that. It's usually over Clear Lake because volcanic activity happens in Clear Lake. You got all the faults over in the Bay Area. I was around in the, was it late 80s? Was that the Hayward Fault that went off? I know that dates myself.
No, that was the San Andreas Fault, and that was all the way down to Loma Prieta in the Santa Cruz Mountains. But you felt that here in Sacramento.
Absolutely. Yeah. So this is a very interesting situation that's going on out there. So no, you weren't. You weren't dreaming if you felt that thing going off. And again, you can see right through here. You've got that dot right there, so I probably should move this graphic over. I had to build this quickly, but that is your one there near Farmington, and then I got a couple of them out past the state line up there off to the east.
And again, just to update people, we are experiencing, again, a 4.8 earthquake near Farmington, and now they're saying a 5.9 near Smith Valley. We'd originally said 6.2. That's down to 5.9 now, the latest number on that.
Attention for sure. The digital seismograph here at the station recorded the jolt. There it is. Big spike right there. And that is the energy of a magnitude 4 earthquake.
First, let's zoom in. If you're not entirely familiar with the part of the Bay Area we're looking at, it is in Alameda County. It is just to the east of San Leandro, to the north of Castro Valley, but that's just where it's centered. You can feel it for quite a ways around that. And this is that Did You Feel It map from the U.S. Geological Survey, people reporting the magnitude of the shaking they had. And most of these reports are on the lower end of the spectrum. Strongest report's actually about 15 miles away in San Ramon. My wife lives in San Ramon, along with me. I'm just not there. She didn't really feel a thing. So this is kind of one of those things where it depends on exactly what you were doing at the time, whether or not you noticed it. But plenty of people mentioning on Twitter that they felt it from all around the Bay Area, even reports from as far away as Sacramento of people feeling this magnitude 4.0 quake.
At least 6 small ones have hit the North Bay since midnight. The biggest was a 3.6 just after 12:30 east of Angwin in Napa County. People reported feeling the shaking as far away as San Jose and Stockton.
But it was the quick succession of 5 minor aftershocks after that one. They were all less than a 2, and it turns out that's perfectly normal and typical behavior.
There's a little bit of vertical motion, so perhaps the land to the east dropped down just a few millimeters relative to the land to the west, and so it's not just a typical horizontal earthquake like we think of in California along the strike slip San Andreas Fault, but this one reminds us that when we look at the landscape of Northern California, there's mountains and there's valleys, and that is at least partially because of earthquakes over the last hundreds of thousands of years.
It was about 11:20. I felt a big jolt. I was like, whoa, what was that?
That was a 3.8 magnitude earthquake. And even though Yvonne Cullen works for a business that sells glass doors and was just blocks away from the epicenter, nothing shattered.
None of it fell, none of it broke or anything.
Yeah, the building shook. It did shake.
Kind of wakes you up and makes you realize you need to be prepared.
This was the epicenter of today's earthquake here in Concord. 9 miles below us is a fault line that doesn't get a whole lot of attention. It's called the Concord fault line. And while the Hayward fault line is more well-known and more dangerous, a seismologist tells us this fault line can create a powerful earthquake as well.
So in order to have a really long earthquake, a really large earthquake, we need a really long fault, and the Concord fault isn't that long. But it could have a magnitude 6 probably.
Seismologist Anne-Marie Balte says today's earthquake reassured her that the USGS models are correct and that the Bay Area should expect more earthquakes of the same intensity.
The fault's telling us that they're still active, they're here.
I know the big one is coming. I'm kind of getting ready for that. I think we've all been getting ready for that for like years at this point, right?
One right now. Did you feel it? A 6.0 earthquake centered near Lake Tahoe could be felt for nearly 200 miles. Check out this belted map from the Bay Area to Las Vegas. People felt that quake. They continue to feel some of the aftershocks as well.
That earthquake took place 250 miles away east and south of San Francisco. Again, 6.0 magnitude earthquake. Now, USGS says that quake began a little before 4 o'clock at 3:49, and those closer to the epicenter say when it began, the ground shook, causing things to fall off of shells that you see there. One shop in Placerville and a shop at Walkerville, they had a the Placerville business rather had the items fall off the shelf. Walkerville business had that roof partially cave in from the force. And those outside, they saw Mother Nature react. You could see boulders crashing down from the hilltops near the region of that epicenter, kicking up dust as it crashed to the ground. Some drivers on Highway 395 had to actually drive around the boulders that landed on the roadway. Now, CHP says there were some cars that were damaged, but no one was injured. And folks, as far as San Jose, they even felt that quake. VNA Arana captured her plants swaying in the moments after that quake. USGS says this is the strongest quake to hit that Antelope Valley fault near Tahoe since a 6.1 hit back in '94.
The ground itself seemed to shake extensively more, and it might be because of, all the granite being here in high desert country, that it's not absorbed like it might be in other parts of the Bay Area. So I think that just made it that much more scarier, that it really rolled. I mean, you could literally see the ground moving.
And that shaking continued after the initial quake. USGS says more than 40 aftershocks were reported in the first 2 hours.
An earthquake swarm had all of us a little shook. Take a look. This is what that swarm looked like this evening. Quake after quake after quake, all starting by that 6.0 centered near Markleeville.
And we are getting our first look at some of the damage near the origin of the quake. This is Walker Thrift Store in the Colville community of Mono County. The quake knocked things to the ground, shattered glass, and made a big mess, as you can see. The store says it's hosting a cleanup tomorrow morning at 10:30.
At 3:49 this afternoon. That was just like you said, near the Markleeville area, where you can see the swarm of earthquakes, and they're still happening even at this hour. Just about 40 minutes ago, I saw a new earthquake pop up, many of them much smaller. Now, a lot of people have been wondering that the initial reports came out that there was an earthquake near the Stockton area in Farmington. It was called a Phantom Quake. So what is that? That just sounds like something we haven't heard about before. We've heard of aftershocks, but a Phantom Quake? Well, think about this. That 6.0 sent out ripples through the region. We have a lot of monitoring stations. It just so happened that it looks like one was accidentally set off, initially triggering a 4.8 in Farmington, but it was indeed all coming from that cluster up there in the high country. And surprisingly enough, there's a lot of faults in the high country. We track earthquakes there every day. Not the same type of faults that we have, those strike slip faults over towards the Bay Area. These are called normal faults, but one, in fact, did get a little bit active for today. The other type that we look at are thrust, but this is what it basically looks like, as we have that vertical movement there, and we had that slip come in for today with that earthquake. The largest earthquakes in California history. You can see the rundown here. The third largest in Owens Valley, that's near Yosemite. That just shows you how active this region is with earthquake activity.
Finally tonight, I also spoke with a woman who lives in South Tahoe, and she said what she saw today really blew her away, because for the first time in 35 years, she said it was the strongest earthquake she had ever experienced. She said the building she was working in was actually rolling, and everybody in that building pretty much evacuated because they were unsure of how dangerous it was.
New pictures show the boulders scattered across 395, causing backups for 90 minutes. It also caused some rocking all the way into the Bay Area. The shake alert system set up throughout the West Coast got to work. We checked in with the USGS about the system's performance.
What went well yesterday and what didn't go as well as you hoped?
Well, the shake alert system did in fact trigger on the earthquake, as it is supposed to. However, because of sparse sensor coverage in the eastern part of California, it didn't get the right answer. It was close, but no cigar.
Doug Given with the USGS says 4 separate sensors have to register there is an earthquake above 4.5 to set it off. Since there are few sensors in that rural area, the ones that picked it up were miles away, delaying the alert to folks near the epicenter, but it sent one to people further away in the Stockton area.
Under optimal circumstances, that's about 5 seconds. In this case, it was more like 25 seconds because of the lack of station coverage.
And if you're in the Bay Area wondering why you didn't get one, the answer, it wasn't strong enough.
It's only sent to an area that's expected to receive shaking of a particular level. And so only if you're in the area of modified Mercalli intensity 3 or greater would you get the alert.
And the sensation above a 3 would be like a heavy truck hitting a building. Out in a parking lot, you would noticeably see the cars swaying back and forth. The USGS says the Shake Alert system continues to improve. It's only about 70% built out across the West, and when finished, they'll have 1,675 sensors to alert you when the big one hits.
The Bay Area could be in grave danger if an earthquake-driven tsunami were to hit our shores. For the first time in more than a decade, the state has remapped the tsunami evacuation zones. The new map covers a much bigger area than it previously did.
5 blocks away to the bay could all be underwater. As to how many more people would be affected, Wilson says it's hard to say. But he says the threat is statewide. In the Bay Area, affected areas now include sections of North Beach, Fremont Street in Soma, and the San Francisco Zoo. And in the East Bay, Emeryville, the Port of Richmond, and the Port of Oakland. As for what people should do to prepare,
check out the maps, see if they live or work or visit areas that are prone to tsunamis, and then just update your plans on what you would do if you got a tsunami warning that something is coming your way. Again, you don't have to go very far to be safe.
Guys, so we've been warned.
The director of the Southern California Earthquake Center, a man by the name of Thomas Jordan, came forward and made a chilling announcement, and that was that the San Andreas Fault appears to be in bad condition, even describing it as being in a critical state.
Recently is that there is another earthquake zone that is more north-south and in line with the southern end of the San Andreas. The junction, by the way, is where we had the big Ridgecrest earthquake. Now, this zone is active, but not as much, and the earthquakes are not as strong. However, the USGS has run the numbers on that zone, and it is also another area with a high likelihood of earthquakes over the next 30 years. Again, here's the San Andreas. That's why all the attention is on that earthquake fault, as it should be. It's through major populated areas. But again, the Sierra is not only very active for earthquakes, it's also very active, geologically speaking, for something else. This is Lassen Peak, less than 100 years ago. Yes, active volcanoes in California have existed and will exist in the future, even though Mammoth, Shasta, and Lassen are dormant now. It's a matter of time before they get active yet once again.
We have our fair share of volcanoes here in California, but they are very different from the types of volcanoes in Hawaii and a lot more dangerous.
As a matter of fact, the California Volcano Observatory has 3 in the highest risk category of very high threat.
California is not only earthquake country, it is also volcano country. The threat is real, and the potential for another volcanic eruption in the state of California is on the order of 1 in 100 to about 1 in a couple thousand in any given year.
Would you buy a lottery ticket with those odds? Well, those odds are why the USGS monitors all 8 volcanoes in the watch list. Lassen Peak and Mount Shasta in the north, and Long Valley Caldera east of Yosemite are California's high-threat volcanoes. Monitoring stations at the volcanoes themselves gather seismic and gas readings, along with data on changes in land topography, then streams it all in real time to this operations room at the observatory. Scientists also watch the molten rock, or magma, flowing 3 miles below Lassen Peak.
We keep a watch on that because if we start to see anything migrating toward the surface, it might suggest that the magmatic system is going to be replenished, and that could provoke an eruption.
Lassen last erupted in May of 1915, miraculously captured on film. There were no known deaths and only a few minor injuries. But should Lassen or Shasta blow today, and it will,
it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when.
The results would be more complicated and concerning depending on the severity and the other conditions like weather. But it would not take us by surprise.
It's likely that you would see weeks to months of warning.
Scientists learn a lot from history. It is a determined odds maker.
The number of volcanic eruptions that occur within the state of California in just the last 1,000 years are about the same as the number of large damaging earthquakes on the San Andreas Fault. We take that hazard seriously. We need to take the volcano hazard seriously.
Most of the ones here in the West are explosive volcanoes.
Northern California is no stranger to volcanoes, although it's been a while since one has blown. And now with millions more people living in the danger zone, how catastrophic will it be when one erupts?
If it decides to erupt big, it will catch the world's attention.
Scientists have categorized 3 of our volcanoes as very high threat: Mount Shasta, Mount Lassen, and the Long Valley region near Mammoth Lakes. So what does that mean? It means these areas have a high population, lots of nearby infrastructure like dams, power plants, and a high volume of aircraft that fly in the area.
All these potentially active volcanoes, there are hundreds, perhaps thousands of jumbo jets that fly over these every day.
The scale only examines potential damage, not timing. Geologists have a network of sensors to monitor volcanic activity, and many communities have disaster response plans in place.
That's really the best thing that can be done, because there's no stopping a volcanic eruption once it starts.
And eruptions like this may not be as far away as you think.
It's very likely that sometime in the near future, perhaps even in our lifetimes, it will erupt again.
A study conducted by the U.S. Geological Survey reveals that at least 10 eruptions in the past 1,000 years happened in Northern California's Lassen Peak from 1914 to 1917. And the peak is only one of 8 volcanic areas in the state that could potentially erupt. The main concern out of the study was the high population surrounding the volcanoes. In fact, Mount Shasta has nearly 104,000 people in its vicinity, and the 4 volcanoes in the Long Valley region have 63,500 people. And thousands more live in other areas which could pose risks, not to mention the volcanoes near national parks and their millions of annual visitors. And the USGS says anywhere from 500 to 1,000 passenger jets fly over the California volcanoes every day.